Imagine standing barefoot on cold stone, the scent of roasting meat mingling with smoke and sweat. Outside, knights polish swords, but in here, a teenage kitchen boy stirs a cauldron the size of a bathtub, scalded hands trembling with exhaustion. Behind every banquet was a battleground of labor, heat, and hunger. This isn't the castle you read about in fairy tales. This is the story of the people who fed it, unsung, unseen yet essential. Welcome to the kitchen, the true heart of the medieval castle. When we think of medieval castles, we picture kings and knights, feasts and firesides. But behind the grandeur, there was a place more vital than the throne room, a world of knives, fire, and frantic hands. This was the castle kitchen, and without it, no banquet could begin, no army could march, no lord could rule. Tucked deep within the walls or buried below ground, castle kitchens were chaotic, smoky hives of activity. Dozens of workers, often poor, young, or bound by duty, labored from before sunrise to well past nightfall. They weren't just cooking. They were feeding a machine, one that ran on meat, bread, beer, and control. Today, we open the iron doors. We descend the steps, and we ask, what was inside a medieval castle kitchen? While nobles dined in splendor above, the work that made it all possible happened below and behind. Castle kitchens were often separated from the main hall, not just to keep the smoke and noise away, but to protect the living quarters from fire. Most large castles had several interconnected spaces. The main kitchen, scullery, pantry, buttery, and larder. Each had a role and each buzzed with activity. The scullery was the kingdom of water and waste. Here, dishes were scrubbed, vegetables washed, and animals gutted. It was dirty, wet, and loud, but vital. The larder stored meat, fish, and other perishables. The buttery held barrels of ale and wine. The pantry stocked bread, cheese, and grain. These spaces were carefully monitored, because theft, spoilage, or rats could mean hunger for all. Every foodstuff was counted, every loaf logged, and above all stood the kitchen steward, part accountant, part enforcer, always watching. With roles divided and routines in place, the kitchen ran like a war camp. And like any army, it had its generals and its foot soldiers. Behind every noble's plate lay a chain of hands, fire, and labor few ever saw. But now we go deeper, into the roar of the hearth. Welcome to the core of the kitchen, the great hearth. In many castles, this was no simple fireplace. It was a blazing, smoke-choked engine of feasting, burning hot from dawn till dusk. There were no ovens as we know them. Instead, castle cooks mastered open-flame cooking, boiling, roasting, searing, and baking in massive clay or stone bread ovens. Timing was everything, and danger was constant. Tending the fire was a job in itself. Fuel had to be hauled in, wood or peat depending on the region, and ashes hauled out. The kitchen reeked of smoke, grease, and roasted meat. Vegetables were chopped for stews. Fish was salted. Dough was kneaded on stone tables. Everything was made from scratch, often for dozens or even hundreds of mouths. Most meals began in the cauldron. Pottage, thick with grains, vegetables, and maybe, if it was a feast day, meat. These one-pot meals were staples, endlessly adaptable and easy to scale. Recipes? Yes, but they weren't for beginners. Medieval cookbooks were written by and for professionals, brief, vague, and full of assumptions. You were expected to know what cook it until done meant. In this inferno of heat, smoke, and precision, the castle kitchen came alive. Food wasn't just sustenance, it was a performance. And for the cook, every meal was a test of fire. What did a medieval cook actually use to prepare a meal? Forget stainless steel and silicone. Castle kitchens were stocked with iron, wood, and stone, heavy, handmade, and brutally efficient. Knives came in all shapes, boning, carving, mincing. Pestles crushed spices with patient rhythm. Spoons were carved from wood or bone. The humble ladle was a cook's best friend. Ingredients came from the castle estate: honey, herbs, onions, and grains. Exotic imports, pepper, cloves, saffron, were worth their weight in silver. A pinch of spice was a sign of status. The kitchen was a crossroads. Bakers, brewers, gardeners, hunters, and merchants all passed through. Behind every grand feast were dozens of hands you'd never see at the table. It wasn't all about food. Someone cleaned the pots. Someone served the bread. The kitchen was a dance of labor, coordinated, relentless, and vital to castle life. Tools and ingredients were just part of the story. The real magic lay in the hands that used them, crafting meals in a world without clocks, timers, or thermometers. Just skill, instinct, and a roaring fire. From sunrise to well past sunset, the castle kitchen followed a strict rhythm, dictated by bells, stomachs, and status. Preparing food for a medieval household wasn't a task. It was a full-time campaign. Each day began early. Bread was first, kneaded and fired before most people stirred. Then broths and pottages simmered slowly. Meats were salted or spit-roasted, pies stuffed and sealed. The timing had to be perfect. Lords expected their trenchers filled at just the right hour. Servants dined separately, usually on simpler fare, like barley and beans. Everyone ate in turns, and no one ate cold. This was no easy job. Fires were hot, accidents common. Meals for dozens or hundreds meant constant motion. Fetching water, tending embers, cleaning up only to start again. Record-keeping was essential. Nothing wasted, nothing unaccounted. Every hunk of cheese or flagon of ale was measured, because feeding a castle was as much about order as it was about appetite. As night fell, the kitchen finally slowed, but only until dawn, when the rhythm would begin again, echoing like a heartbeat through the stone halls above. Forget the turkey legs and overflowing goblets of Hollywood. Real castle kitchens cooked with what they had. And what they had was shaped by seasons, soil, and trade routes. Vegetables were the foundation: leeks, cabbages, onions, parsnips. Grains filled the belly: barley, oats, and rye. Most meals began with a pottage, a thick stew that varied depending on the cook's imagination and what was in season. Meat was valuable and rarely wasted. Salted pork, smoked fish, or the occasional goose made their way into broths and pies. Game birds and venison arrived from the lord's hunts, prestigious, but unpredictable. And then the real luxury: spices, pepper, cloves, saffron imported from far-off lands were a way to show status. A lord's palate might be more global than you think, even if he'd never left the county. Preservation mattered too. Drying, salting, smoking, fermenting, these weren't just techniques. They were survival strategies, turning summer abundance into winter security. Castle food was hearty, practical, and surprisingly clever. It had to be, because feeding a household through feast and famine took more than a recipe. It took knowledge, creativity, and grit. No gas stoves, no electric ovens. Yet somehow the castle kitchen fed hundreds daily. How? With fire, muscle, and a toolkit that was part blacksmith, part magician. The hearth was the heart. Here, meals were roasted, boiled, and baked, often at the same time. A spit boy turned roasting meat with aching arms, while pots simmered beside him on iron trammels. Knives were precious and often shared. Mortars and pestles ground herbs into pastes. Pies were shaped in wooden molds. Ale was stored in oak barrels, vinegar in glazed jugs, and butter wrapped in linen. They baked in ovens made of stone and clay, heated by fire, then cleared of ash before bread or pies were placed inside. Timing was instinct, not timers. You had to feel the heat, hear the dough. It was backbreaking work. Heavy, smoky, relentless. But these tools, primitive though they seem, were ingenious. They did the job, day after day, feast after feast. A medieval cook didn't need gadgets. They needed skill, and they wielded their tools like artists, with rhythm, memory, and a fire-lit intuition passed down through generations. What did all this kitchen labor lead to? Food, lots of it. For the noble lord, his household, visiting knights, and a small army of servants. Every day, the castle kitchen fed dozens, sometimes hundreds, and on feast days, it was a spectacle. Meals in a castle followed a strict rhythm. 2 main courses a day. Bread was always present, usually in thick trenchers. Meat dominated the noble diet: mutton, venison, pork, and fowl. Fish was eaten on Fridays, and sometimes disguised with spices so it tasted like meat. A lord's feast was an orchestrated event. Dishes came in removes, several at once. You might see roast crane, almond milk stews, eel pies and custards, all served in ornate vessels. Drink flowed freely, ale, mead, and imported wine for the wealthier castles. Water was rarely trusted, and spices, like cinnamon, pepper, and ginger, weren't just flavor, they were status symbols. But not everyone dined like lords. The kitchen staff and soldiers ate simpler fare, pottage, rye bread, salted fish. Still, it filled the belly and kept the castle running. Even leftovers had purpose, shared with the poor or the animals. Nothing was wasted. In the great machine of the medieval castle, food was energy, ceremony, and culture, all stewing in one great pot. Today, castle kitchens stand silent. The fires are out. The clatter of knives and the hiss of boiling pots, long gone. But their legacy simmers on in ways we often overlook. The techniques medieval cooks developed, slow roasting, stewing, spicing, preserving, laid the groundwork for centuries of culinary tradition. Their recipes echoed in the manor kitchens of the Renaissance, then into the homes of the early modern world. Their ingredients changed, but the rituals didn't. Gathering, preparing, sharing food, these human acts rooted in the medieval kitchen still bind us together today. And in a way, we're still there with them, roasting meat over flame, baking loaves, layering flavors. The castle kitchen reminds us that food is more than survival. It is memory, celebration, and story. So next time you cook a humble stew or light a hearth fire, remember the hands that stirred long before yours. Their world shaped ours, one wooden spoon at a time.